Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. I have far too much news to dive into tonight, so whether you're joining us on the radio, the TV side, the live stream, podcast crew, we're glad that you are with us. It appears that the United States is engaged in a series of airstrikes, fighter jets currently over Tehran. This has now been confirmed by multiple sources. So the small area of Tehran that is currently being struck so far is called Narmak. It is on the eastern side of Tehran next to Sorhe Hesar National Park. Now, as far as I am aware, while this would make the 11th straight day of strikes, CENTCOM, that would be U.S. Central Command, has not released a statement that we are beginning our latest series of strikes. There is no statement yet that appears to echo that. Now, there has been, some push out from CENTCOM today talking about redirecting 8 commercial vessels, disabling one to fully enforce the U.S. blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. But this particular series of strikes, which are now also being reported in Bebahan and Mashhar in Iran near the Strait of Hormuz, also strikes reported in the center of Iran. And as we are now able to confirm here at 7:08 p.m. Eastern Time on July 21st, the fighter jets are active over Tehran. And those are not Iranian fighter jets because they have absolutely none of them left. So we're going to be keeping an eye on this. This could, in fact, be, and I have to say could, in fact, be, because it matters when I give you speculation versus analysis versus the direct news itself. The United States changing policy based on statements made as of an hour ago by Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps members. I'm going to skip around in my notes here to explain. So one IRGC official, there was a report earlier today at around noon that there was evidence beginning to emerge that a concerted Iranian effort had begun not to just target desalination facilities in Kuwait, that would be water purification facilities, power plants and refineries in the UAE, in Kuwait, and in Qatar, but also trying to spend the majority of their missiles and drone strikes on attempting to attack U.S. housing in the region. So particularly belaying housing areas for troops on bases across the Middle East. Of course, this would be in line with the deadly strike at Muwafaq al-Salti Air Force Base or Air Base, I should say, that was in Jordan, in which, of course, Iran struck, killing 2 soldiers, an officer and an enlisted. Now, also a strike on Tower 22 in eastern Jordan also fits this. So as I was trying to dig through some of the notes in preparation for the show and confirm this, a video was released from an Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps spokesman who just outright confirmed it. Here you go. So he begins by, issuing this kind of in half prayer and says that because the United States has targeted the private residences of our commanders and their families, all your commanders in the region will now be targeted in their private residences as well. And what this means specifically, and I think there's a slight mistranslation here because the actual direct translation doesn't just say your commander's private residences. It just says your troops, your men, their private residences, meaning where U.S. troops are sleeping, that's where they're going to strike. Now, is this a fair target in war? Absolutely. Is it, when you are playing kind of the proportional response game, is that necessarily the wisest move? Absolutely not. Now, the obvious reason that Iran is trying to strike more United States residences, trying to strike those troops who are in, temporary housing, that are in on-base housing. The point of doing so is to try to rack up as many casualties as possible to turn the entire American opinion against any kind of action, to make it expensive. Now, the bet here is that this will drive the United States to the negotiating table. And they have no idea how Donald Trump works in any way whatsoever. He was the president today talking about Pickaxe Mountain, which is considered the last major nuclear site after Fordo and Natanz and Isfahan were hit. Some of the centrifuges from Natanz and a couple of unfinished centrifuges for refining and enriching uranium were moved to Pickaxe Mountain, which is located just outside of the Natanz nuclear facility. And I think we have that one up on a map as well. You can see this is a map provided to us by the Washington Examiner crew. And you can see that those are all in central Iran in that mountain range region south of Tehran. Tehran has a mountain range to its west and then continues on to its south. So that's all in that general mountain corridor. I guess it'd be the opposite of a corridor because it's all mountainous. Here was the president of the United States, though, on whether the United States would go forward with striking Pickaxe Mountain.
Haley Bull, Scripps News. Thank you for the question. Do you believe that Iran has moved nuclear centrifuges into Pickaxe Mountain? And when you say we're not done yet, what is left to finish?
Well, I think that they may have. We don't have it on record. All we do is read the fake news. You know, we see the news is so wrong so many times. So, you know, maybe this one they have right, but it's okay. It doesn't mean anything unless they have the material. You're talking about the centrifuges. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything unless they have the material. They don't have. We follow the material. That's where the action is, and we'll be hitting that area probably pretty soon. And there's not a thing they can do about it. You know, normally I wouldn't say that. If I thought they could do something about it, I would never say that. But we'll be hitting that area pretty soon, and very heavily.
So the president's statement there, again, is just kind of following where things are going, looking to where things are going to be, where they're not going to be. That seems to be how the president is using that side of the strikes. Now, the president has also made it clear that if the Iranians kill any U.S. servicemen, then that is going to be met with a much stronger reaction from the United States. Now, I want to dive into a couple of things. After the president issued this statement earlier today, several U.S. Air Force B-1 Lancer heavy bombers were seen departing air bases in the United Kingdom and heading south and east. And there were clips of that, of course, captured. You can see the B-1 Lancers, not exactly your average, Boeing 737 taking off, heading towards the Middle East. Again, we don't have any information as to whether those have been used just yet this evening. However, we do have information. There have been 11 huge explosions in the Khuzestan province in Iran. That is at the north end of the Strait of Hormuz, close to the Iraqi border. Bandar-e-Mashar as well. I know I'm pronouncing these really horribly. I don't care. Right next to the Iraq and Kuwaiti borders with Iran. Kuwait on the Strait of Hormuz, or on the Gulf of Oman up the strait there. So one of the reasons why the United States again has been levying a more intense round of strikes against Behbahan and Bandar-e-Mashar up again at the top of the Strait of Hormuz is because the Iranians have been using those sites in order to target Kurdish forces, in order to target Kuwait. The Kuwaiti air defense has been activated like yet another night in a row. We'll get to Pickaxe Mountain itself here in just a second. The statement from the Kuwaiti ministry, the general staff of the Kuwaiti armed forces confirmed that any explosions that may be heard are the result of air defense systems intercepting hostile targets. By the way, these include both missiles and drones. They say the public is urged to adhere to safety and security instructions issued by the relevant authorities. So the Kuwaitis are not particularly pleased that Iran has begun solely targeting civilian and residential areas. Now, of course, the United States at the time is already suspected to be essentially putting up empty buildings. So during the Second World War, there was quite a game that was being played by the Allies in which the Allied forces would build fake structures with like inflatable tanks to make the Germans then bomb sites that didn't have anything useful at them. And then the Germans did the same, and there's one famous story of the Allies then dropping wooden models of bombs on these fake bases. And it appears that the United States may also be constructing, temporarily setting up some fake facilities while using Kuwaiti, Bahrainian, and Jordanian police to ferret out and capture those who would then be charged with espionage for trying to report on where the United States is actually stationing her troops. Radio crew, we have to send you over to the commercial break before I get a lovely wrist slap from the FCC. We're going to continue on the live stream because there's way too much news to stop. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Well, boys, girls, and squirrels, more attacks are currently present, including one attack in Tabriz. Tabriz is up near the northern part of Iran, again, closer to the border it shares with, again, Iraq. That's up near Turkey. That northern Tabriz is where the United States had originally struck a couple of weeks ago, or I should say just over a week ago, one of the rail bridges that was being used as a major in-source rail route to get some kinds of various munitions, certain kinds of regime auxiliary supplies like medical supplies, structural fortification supplies like braces for caves, things like that. So the United States also striking some of those northern routes in the country as well. Additional strikes reported in Bandar Abbas. A couple of additional explosions in the East Azerbaijan province. It's unclear if this was a strike due to fighter jets or bombers, or whether these were ballistic missile launches from the United States. Now, again, while an explosion in eastern Tehran has just been announced according to an Iranian news source. So, as a gas leak incident, my oh my, the country is currently facing a major natural gas shortage. They are facing a serious natural and residential gas shortage. We've shown photos here on the air of Iranian individuals lining up in cars in order to get any kind of gas that they can get their hands on, whether that's refined gasoline. A lot of the refineries in Iran have been shut down. They can't pay people to work because the currency is worthless. I'll let Secretary of War Pete Hegseth explain this here in a couple of moments. And again, there are fighter jet engines also being reported over Iran's capital, Tehran, as well. So it's a little unlikely that this gas leak is true. But again, we share the updates with you as they come. Also, for a brief moment today, and this is just something that I find a little interesting, people try to track flights based on like flight radar, the transponder of the craft saying, hey, I am this plane and I am going here. Occasionally, you will see some military craft which are on that, that are on that map, that charting. There were a couple of A-10s, A-10 Thunderbolts, close air support type craft that have been, again, doing that kind of movement toward the Middle East before they shut their transponders off. So there's a whole host of craft which are now making their ways to the Middle East. Now, before we cut over to, because again, we have Representative Brandon Gill of Texas here with us also, so I'm going to have to keep moving. There are a couple of major media reports that came out in a 6-hour window of each other. The Atlantic, the Washington Post, and Axios, all citing these unnamed U.S. officials who say that intelligence says nothing is ever going to change and Iran will last for 1,000 years. I went ahead and went through this report, partly because our excellent team over at Athos had me dive into this article as soon as it was published. And I was not quite shocked to see that in the Washington Post article, the major focus is a think tank on the East Coast, the Atlantic something or other, not the outlet, but like an Atlantic-style think tank, saying that, well, they don't think that the Iranian mullahs are going to give up based on airstrikes. Axios then took this and kind of did a little 1-2 step over and said that the United States has two options. Number one is it does a 10-day ceasefire. And I'm not joking. They like a 10-day ceasefire. And then number two, they go in with Israel, boots on the ground, and like tackle Tehran. I don't know what child playing Modern Warfare decided that those were the two options, but boys and girls, that's not how that works at all. And as if to illustrate such point, that brings us to the Saudi Arabians. So the Houthis down in Yemen, again, one of the proxy terror networks of the Iranians, the last one really that's functioning because Hezbollah is having trouble. Hamas doesn't really exist anymore. This particular crew, our radio crew, speaking of, is now joining us back from their commercial break. Welcome back, guys. The Houthis have now said, we are going to shut down the Bab al-Mandeb Strait and we will destroy any Saudi, United States, or Egyptian craft that tries to move through the Red Sea and beyond. That was a bad move, as we'll get to in a second, but the President of the United States also commented on that today. Here's the President saying, if something's coming, the Houthis are getting a little uppity, we'll take care of them like we have before.
But we take care of things. If something like that happens, we take care of it. You know, we've done that with the Houthis before, and we haven't heard from them in a while.
Now, to be clear, two administrations have dealt with the Houthis in rather different ways. The Trump administration has sent missiles and then a press release. Joe Biden's administration, again, as we'll talk about here in a second, due to that coming up with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand in committee today with Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, the Biden administration handled the Houthis by issuing a press warning, and then Biden would say, we're running 48 hours, and then everyone would leave, and then we would throw missiles into the dirt. Because if there were two things the Biden administration were really, really good at, it was sending missiles and Toyota Hiluxes to the middle of nowhere in the Middle East. But I digress. As we continue tracking these Iranian strikes, the president saying if the Houthis decide to get in on this, we'll allow Saudi Arabia a little extra something to jump in here. And it appears this is the goal of the United States diplomatically. This is clearly what Secretary of State Marco Rubio and acting National Security Advisor, mind you, as well as a ton of other hats the man wears, has been attempting to negotiate in the Middle East. One of the reasons that Rubio and then the president today has spent a lot of time with the Lebanese government is to try to get the rest of the Gulf states off of the Israeli, Lebanese, and Hezbollah conflict and onto joining the United States in active operations, not just sending strongly worded letters. Well, according to the Secretary General of the Arab League, that would be in Cairo, sort of a response to NATO, sort of a response to the Warsaw Pact that just didn't really, reach puberty, but it's still kind of around. The Arab League in Cairo, according to their Secretary General, has now announced that they are fully backing the Saudi Arabians in, and I quote, all security matters. That is a massive blow to both the Muslim Brotherhood, which is still prominent in Egypt, to the Turks, who are not exactly thrilled with the Saudis being given any kind of diplomatic alignment. They want to be the head. Again, that's that old Ottoman Empire wanting to rear its head again. And then, of course, Iran is upset because Iran's always upset, So that brings us over to committee today on this. So General Caine, again, chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, began by giving condolences for the 3 U.S. servicemen and women who were lost over the weekend, the one in the controlled demolition, and then the two, as we already described, the officer and the enlisted, in the missile strike by Iran.
I'd like to begin by expressing my deep condolences and that of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the SEAC for the fallen from this past weekend and their families. Today, we remember First Lieutenant Tyler Feehan, Sergeant Michael Swinton, and Private Isabel Gonzalez, and note that the names of our last fallen will be released when we can. I'm humbled daily by the profound commitment of the incredible 2.8 million Americans, just like these names that I've just mentioned, who make up our joint force and serve our nation every day.
Now, there was one key clip that's been shared a lot today, and that would be a series of questions that that Senator Kennedy of Louisiana, a very common sense kind of, salt of the earth senator from Louisiana, he shared with Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. But there was a broader clip that was shared by C-SPAN in which Secretary Kennedy questions both Hegseth and General Caine. And I think it's probably important enough, given that we're now talking about Pickaxe Mountain and its capabilities, to share the entire 2-minute clip here with you. Check it out.
Some of my colleagues, General, want America to just stop in Iran. In the blockade, bring all of our warriors home. What would be the consequences of that, in your estimation?
Sir, I think termination criteria is always a political decision. However, I assess that Iran will continue to be a challenge moving forward. So we have to be thoughtful about that.
Will they put tolls on the strait?
I don't know, sir. That's a decision that's a hypothetical and will depend on what happens in the future.
It's not hypothetical. We've got a blockade to stop them.
We do, sir. That's
General,
putting
I want you
economic
to look me in
pressure
the
on
eye.
Iran.
I'm not asking you for, I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I know your advice to the president is private.
By the way, for the record, this is what committees are supposed to be. It's what committees are supposed to be. You are supposed to have tough questions that get those who are serving in the administration, whether that's in a military aspect, whether that's in a political aspect, whether that's in the general bureaucracy, in the executive branch, whether that's someone who has been brought in for testimony or subpoena, etc. That's how these committees are supposed to go. They're tough questions. You ask the question, and then you get answers, and then you respond to those answers.
But this is serious as 4 heart attacks and a stroke. Now, what happens if we come home and end the blockade to the world?
Sir, Iran has the potential to continue to be a threat, and we will need to prepare military
Will they
options to do
toll the
that.
strait?
Sir, that's a hypothetical question, and I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, it's not hypothetical. We come home. It's not going to be hypothetical. You know that, General, and I do too. And I appreciate your discretion, but we're down to it. We need some hard answers and some straight talk.
And the reason that he's pointing this out is because there are questions from the American people that deserve answering. Americans want to know, what are the options? What does the end game look like? And then what happens when we take those options? Now, again, General Caine said here, that's not my particular perspective. I can tell you what I know. That's not something I feel comfortable answering in the hypotheticals. That's not what I was appointed to this position, promoted to this position to do. He pivots.
What will happen, Pete?
Senator, I would agree with the chairman, but the likely outcome is they would try to impose their will on the waterways in ways that the world would not like. Call it a toll, call it a fee, call it an exchange, call it control. They would do something that they would try to hold it at issue. Yes, sir.
Would they try to commence development again of a nuclear warhead?
Part of the reason President Trump had to have the courage to do what he did after Midnight Hammer is that they didn't give up their ambitions even though their nuclear sites had been obliterated. So this is a regime hell-bent on nuclear ambitions, and President Trump's been willing to go after it.
We need straight answers. Do we have the ability to destroy whatever is underneath Pickaxe Mountain?
Senator, a lot of our capabilities are classified, but if anybody in the world can reach anything on God's green earth, it's the United States military, the most powerful military in the world. It's all about options and trade-offs.
If you've ever wanted to know why I despise, I mean, probably not why I want to know, why a lot of people despise cameras in committee rooms, it's this. If the Senate of the United States Congress, the Senate, can't sit down and have a conversation with generals, can't sit down and have a conversation classified with military leaders, with the Secretary of War, and have discussions about our capabilities, then it's all worthless. And you and I know exactly why they can't. Because some senator that's trying to do a little campaign commercial or wants to leak things to the international press and then have the true capabilities unclassified, leaked from the United States military in front of Tehran and Beijing and Moscow, etc. ad nauseum in about 5 minutes, then they would answer those questions. Now, as to Pickaxe Mountain, I want to get back to that. I do have an update for you. Appears the gas leak theory, at least as purported by the Iranians in Tehran, was absolute hogwash. Iranian air defenses are currently active over Sakhanak in northeastern Tehran. So Tehran is currently being hit by the United States. Most likely, again, there are several aircraft that reported over it. It is unclear as to just yet what aircraft are carrying out these strikes, whether they're F-35s, whether they're F-22s, whether, again, it's the A-10s that are participating, probably unlikely if we're seeing anti-air. Again, the A-10's a little bit of a slower bird, not that exact type of close air support, not exactly that kind of CAS. Last but not least, we don't know if it's the B-1s just yet. We're keeping an eye on it. Another huge blast has been reported in Bakhne, that's the Kurdistan province in Iran. So if you took Iran and you cut it in half like a cake, and I'll try to pull up one of the maps that we have of Iran so you can get a better picture of this here. That line of nuclear sites, and I know Radio Crew, you need over the commercial, but you got to get this before I shift you guys out. From Tehran to the west, that entire area and then all of the areas along the coast of the Strait of Hormuz appears to be where Iran is getting pelted right here and right now. And their air defenses so far don't seem to be doing a whole lot. This is right after the Iranians decided the new strategy needed to be striking U.S. barracks and prefabricated housing in, and not to mention civilian areas around the other Gulf states. Radio crew will send you guys to the commercial. We have more news to report here on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. There is a huge wave of attacks in Parchin, which is also east of Tehran. So from northwestern Tehran through over to the eastern portion of Tehran, the entire Iranian regime capital is being pelted with a series of strikes that appear to be fighter jet driven. Just checking a couple of things here, because we have, I believe, some footage that is coming out of Iran. I want to make sure that we get this all verified, because I don't want to show you guys things that are, for example, someone trying to use older sourced footage just for clicks. This is a fire line, again, things post-strike, that we can confirm in Bekhbahan. That's in southwestern Iran, right along. You can see quite a bit of fire. Bekhbahan is at the northern tip of the Strait of Hormuz. Or not the Strait, excuse me, not the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf of the Persian Gulf. Right at the northern tip of the Persian Gulf. And again, right in that kind of vertical line from Tehran down the nuclear facilities to the coast of the Persian Gulf. So that brings us over to, again, I told you that Gillibrand was giving Hegseth a lot of grief as the Secretary of War today. About the capabilities of the United States military, about funding things. I talked about Biden's administration briefly. Here was that exchange, a lot of fireworks amid all of this.
What's the status?
The nuclear sites under Midnight Hammer were obliterated, but Iranians foolishly continued to attempt to pursue nuclear capabilities, which is why we destroyed their defense industrial base and so many of the other capabilities to ensure they can't get to a nuclear weapon. See, we're staying laser focused on the objective, and you're trying to make campaign commercials.
No, we're
and
not.
That's fine.
So,
by the way, what the secretary is saying there is not wrong. The Iranians are continuing. Again, religious fundamentalists, those who are Islamists who believe that this is the way that they usher in their eschaton, the 13th Imam, they're going to keep doing this no matter what. Until the people rise up, until there's firearm proliferation, until there's balkanization, etc. The United States will continue in the necessity of removing these nuclear sites. And for every other individual out there who says that perhaps this isn't necessary, just a bit of analysis here, is that as the United States is striking Tehran, it is clear that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is still attempting to hoard centrifuges, not for just, random, lovely power for their citizens. Again, they may have some power outages right now, but it's not for a lack of fuel and resources in the conventional. No, in fact, it is easier for them to provide power than almost any other resource. It's a very oil-rich country. Now, again, forward from there's also a really bizarre report today which suggested that J.D. Vance, the vice president, and his crew were trying desperately to keep Donald Trump from meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel because Vance, apparently, according to this report that's bogus, didn't want President Trump to go ahead and move forward and finish off Iran. That's not how that works, and anyone who tells you that is retarded. The vice president can't intervene and delay the president meeting from certain people. That's not a thing at all. So just to be clear, in the term of a lot of reporting today, just appears to be click driven. And I can't stand it because there are quite a few details here that need to be reiterated as quickly as possible that we can verify them. So for example, just a couple of seconds ago, U.S. Central Command reported, 2 minutes ago, on July 21st here of 2026, quote, CENTCOM forces began striking military targets in Iran at 7 p.m. Eastern today for the 11th consecutive night. The strikes are designed to continue degrading Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. And it is a much more severe strike than we have seen over even the last couple of days. Now, again, this also comes amid the questions as to whether or not there are members of the administration interested in seeking some kind of a ceasefire. So far, it does not appear that the United States is interested in seeking some kind of a ceasefire, which is being pushed by Qatar. Now, over to a couple of other updates here. It is clear that air defenses are being activated as well in southern Tehran. So there are now 3 different points in Tehran that we can allude to in which the United States appears to be striking. Again, it's not quite clear what it is that these strikes are intended to do. Obviously, CENTCOM's statement is about the ability of the United States to degrade Tehran's ability to strike in the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran is not exactly close to the Strait of Hormuz. Radio crew, welcome back from your commercial break. We have a ton of news here on the Tony Kinnett Cast. And that brings us, speaking of all of these committees, I do want to share one last point from Secretary of War Hegseth on what he considers to be the ability of the Iranian regime. And then there's a lot more. And I believe also, of course, we have Representative Brandon Gill joining us from Texas shortly.
Iran is at the weakest point militarily it has ever been in the past decade, certainly maybe in 47 years, as they've gathered effectively a terror army. And that terror army was built to try to create conventional capability to defend against a pursuit of nuclear weapons, which meant thousands of ballistic missiles, many of which we have destroyed, others of which they have put inside facilities and hidden in underground facilities. That's what terror regimes would do. So I acknowledge they still have capabilities, no doubt. But the amount of damage that we've done to them over the course of these series of operations has put them in the worst place they've ever been.
So that brings us over to some of the other really intense committee stuff today. So Anthea Hartig, she's the director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of History, was dragged before a House committee today based on a lot of really, really bizarre and arguably very illegal racial discriminatory practices in the Smithsonian, again, the major museums and study institution for the United States. And it got pretty frisky pretty quickly. So a lot of committee nonsense, I'm sure, to get C-SPAN excited. First of all, her opening testimony and her patting herself on the back is precious.
Congress created the Smithsonian Institution in 1846 with an aspirational mission of diffusion in knowledge. Can you imagine the increase in diffusion of knowledge? It is an independent trust instrumentality outside the executive branch of government and is governed by a board of regents that includes all 3 branches of government and 9 citizen regents appointed by a joint resolution of Congress.
So that's how she talks through basically the entire thing. I'm not going to play all of it for you because there's a ton of news and I don't have time to listen to Karen Supreme over here telling us how everything is apolitical. It's the same kind of stuff that Americans heard from PBS and NPR. Oh, we're not political. There's nothing wrong here. Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee, he immediately pointed out, well, there happen to be a lot, and I mean the baker's dozen of exhibits at the museums that are overtly sexual. And again, given that families take their kids to these museums and then browse their exhibits online, there's kind of a problem here, don't you agree? And of course, she immediately goes from being the proud director to kind of running away scared, which is kind of a theme in a lot of these committees, all the way over from when we talk about the senators that don't want to reckon with international matters in Iran, all the way over to, again, the Smithsonian's allegiance to actually providing good content in its obligation to the American people. Representative Tim Burchett.
Gender and sexuality are highlighted by your museum. The poster behind me shows an exhibit called Entertainment Nation on display now. Do you think these exhibits behind me are appropriate for children?
So I recognize some of the images from Entertainment Nation and from, I think, some other sources. But let me, I think, tell you what I think is most important.
Ma'am.
Or just answer the question. I recognize some of these exhibits. Great, awesome. That solves a bunch of back and forth. So do you find these overtly sexual displays and exhibits to be appropriate for families and their kids?
I mean,
yes.
You have pictures of bondage. You have some overtly sexual things up there. You have transgendered folks. I assume that's what they are. And some.
She of course takes a lot of offense to this. By the way, the materials here that are being referenced specifically by the representative, like crotch harnesses, chest binders, pages from a 6-year-old's diary in which she prays, quote, every night for my penis to grow, a girl, and like displaying that at the Smithsonian. Again, a bunch of drag stuff and, you know, I guess the Dixie Chicks posing nude, which I don't think anyone's ever asked for that ever. But anywho, the big thing, the big scheme for the day came from Representative Brandon Gill getting in a bit of a fight, because while I was in education, again, yours truly here, used to work in the public education system as a science teacher. When I got hired over at Indianapolis Public Schools as the science administrator there, we were required to institute certain things into our education practices that included these guidelines from the Smithsonian on white culture. Essentially, these were things that we were supposed to avoid at all costs because they perpetuated white supremacy or whatever. I will never, ever, ever forget Patricia Paine over in Indianapolis lecturing us all about how all of these really bad things were all very white. So like rugged individualism, the family structure, so like nuclear families is bad. The father being the head of the family is considered white supremacist. Emphasis on being objective and rational, again, from like the Smithsonian crew, putting this up and actually making this a mainstay of what they promoted for ages. I mean, they got this up and rolling in the early aughts. Also, they thought that it was evil and white supremacist, that the United States Museum of National History focused on where we're coming from. So like elements of the British Empire are bad. Christianity, anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. Protestant work ethic, being on time, like actually showing up on time for things, punctuality, planning for the future, white supremacist, all of this kind of nonsense. So this was taken to task by Representative Brandon Gill, and it may be one of the greatest moments I think that we've witnessed, because again, Gill usually brings these kind of receipts. Here you go.
Excuse me, sir?
Is it important to be polite?
Yes, sir.
It's also interesting because the same mass action toolkit that your organization has been promoting references politeness as a defining characteristic of white supremacy culture. Ma'am, are you a white supremacist?
No, sir.
You're not. Can you help me square why your organization says that being polite is part of being a white supremacist?
I'm not exactly familiar with that passage of the Mass Action Toolkit, which is not
I can show you the
one that we
passage right
developed.
here.
So again, I'm afraid not. You got to bring receipts. This kind of nonsense, it isn't going to work. When the American people are looking at things and saying, I have the videos, I have the clips, I have the articles, I have the documents right here. I just do not believe that we're going to see kind of in the future people get away with this kind of garbage. Representative Brandon Gill also, again, on the Smithsonian calling Mickey Mouse racist. I'm going to say that over one more time here in this committee. The Smithsonian, like the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, with an entire thing on Mickey Mouse being racist.
Yes, under your leadership, it has been used as a reference. Is Mickey Mouse racist?
Mickey Mouse is not racist.
It's not racist. According to the Smithsonian institution, one of your exhibits referenced Mickey Mouse as representing, quote, vestiges of longstanding traditions of blackface minstrelsy.
Get it? Because like Mickey Mouse, his face is kind of black on the outside and it's white on the inside, so it is like a racist minstrel show. That was the Smithsonian, the brilliant historians that we have over there.
Would you describe that as racist?
No, the historical trajectory of the origins of Mickey Mouse tied directly
so Mickey Mouse is rooted in racism. Is that your testimony?
No, sir, it's rooted in minstrelsy.
Minstrelsy, you don't think?
Oh, it's minstrel. Incredible. I'm thrilled. What a magical time indeed. Radio crew, we have to send you guys over to the commercial break. I apologize that it'll kind of work out this way. We'll have to fade you guys back in while we're on with Representative Brandon Gill. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, you guys are going to enjoy this one, Brandon Gill. Good to be joined by Brandon Gill of Texas, fresh out of yet another round of boxing matches on Smithsonian reform and also a brand new bill to introduce. Well, you don't stop, do you, man?
We try not to. There's a lot of work to do. The people sent us up here to save the country.
Well, one of these things that I don't really hear talked about a lot on the coasts, but obviously matters a lot to those in the middle of the country, are all of these semi-drivers who don't speak English, who are transporting tons of cargo on our roads, or they're in office or in business. They don't communicate the language. It's a huge safety hazard. You've introduced the English Language Proficiency Act to rescind English proficiency and civics examination exemptions and exceptions from U.S. naturalization law.
Yeah, so first of all, you can start at first principles, which is that a common language is what binds a country together more than almost anything else. In other words,
right.
If you can't communicate with your neighbor, can you really have deep civic bonds or civic ties with each other? It's obviously very difficult. So a common language, the English language, is and should be a core part of being an American. But unfortunately, under current law, there are certain exemptions of the English language requirement. So if you're above 55 or 60 and you've been in the country for between 15 and 20 years, depending on your age, then you can be exempt from this requirement. And what my bill does is simply rescinds that exemption, just to ensure that if you're going to become a naturalized citizen of this country, you can actually engage and you can actually be a part of the body politic and not remain sort of in many ways a foreigner on American soil.
So along that line of foreigners on American soil, again, this is a common sense thing that a lot of the country keeps asking, why weren't we already doing these kinds of things? That brings us over to the Save America Act. I can't count how many times that you and your colleagues have now passed a version of the Save America Act out of the House. Do you think that at this point, your very simple rescinding of an exemption here on language proficiency, do you think that it's going to kind of suffer the same, let's not get too hastiness of some Republicans and Democrats in the Senate? What are you seeing kind of in the future of that, and what's it going to take for that whole boil to pop?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of good legislation that we'd like to get through, both the House and the Senate. I think that we've got some mechanisms to get at least as much of the Save America Act done as possible before the midterms, which I think is a great thing for us to be doing. I'm going to continue pushing both the Save America Act and the English Language Proficiency Act. And I think that these are common sense bills that the vast majority of our country should agree with. I'm not really sure why there would be any real good faith opposition to either one.
So if we actually take a look at some of the other opposition, out here, this kind of brings me over to the legacy reforms that people sent you to Congress to begin. Some of these institutions, I'm a former educator, a former science teacher, actually. And so I'm very well acquainted with the Smithsonian and the way that they have changed a lot of their operational procedures in the last 25 to 30 years. I know that you've been doing a lot of hearings. I know my colleague over, Mike Gonzalez at the Heritage Foundation, he's done a lot of testifying to kind of the rot in the underbelly of these federally funded institutions. How is that process of reform going? And what are you finding now that we're not just kind of peeking in the windows from the outside, but actually getting a look at the foundation?
Yeah, we just got out of our first hearing on this. And this is something that the White House has done really, really good work on. And the reality is that the Smithsonian Institution has been transformed really over the past decade or so, and has been just steeped in far left Marxist ideas. And you see that throughout the exhibitions that they promote. You see an exhibition with transgenders wearing bondage gear, again, in the Museum of American History.
You don't want to see that when you're walking with your kids through a museum? I'm shocked.
No, and that's the thing. Normal people don't want to see this kind of stuff, certainly not whenever you're around children. But you also see all kinds of DEI infused into the organization, promoting people who are, the transgender Guatemalan whoever, over promoting the founding fathers of this country. Promoting and insinuating that illegal aliens should have the right to vote in American elections. You see exhibits that do that. You see them trying to stop Americans from using terms like illegal aliens and instead use undocumented citizens. I mean, you can really go on and on and on. But it's not just the exhibits, it's their civic engagement as well. in some of the publications that they've put out, where the Smithsonian Institution has promoted illegal alien activists who are explicitly working to change elections in the United States. They tried to shift or move a sheriff's race just a few years ago, and the Smithsonian Institution highlighted them as, participants in American democracy. I mean, this kind of stuff is insane. And this is the stuff that the American people are so sick of, seeing what should be an institution that, really promotes the grandeur of the greatest country in the world, in fact, being one that actively works against American values and promotes a moral system that so many Americans find repugnant.
I mean, the repugnance is all throughout it. I'm trying to imagine the same people who just complained that the UFC event at the White House for the 250th was somehow super duper Trumpian and it was just a campaign rally. Oh, the terrible, the pearl clutching. And yet when you have federally funded institutions which are doing part of their civic engagement, whether that's the Smithsonian, the National Atmospheric Oceanic Administration, those who have civic engagement sections of their agencies that are meant to engage the civilians of the United States so that for accountability, for education, for showing you where your tax dollars are going, using that to weigh in and advertise activism on the far left and even, again, foreigner influence in the country, it's insane. Hearing you say that to me, I can't imagine shifting a race as being a core part of the Smithsonian's aims here. What did they say when you asked them about this kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's that they've explicitly moved the organization in the direction of social justice.
No accidents.
Looking at history through the lens of social justice as an activist lens, that we are active participants in history.
If you're not an activist, then you're not a true citizen or whatever, which is just nonsense.
That's right. And it is genuinely insane. But, you also see them promoting all the same kind of woke ideas that every institution, in the early 2020s was pushing. So I got to ask Ms. Director Hardick, who's the director of the National Museum of American History today, basic questions about some of the stuff that they had been promoting. One of them was they had this toolkit. It was an anti-racist toolkit. And as part of it stipulated the different components of a white supremacist culture. And among those components are politeness and
being on time.
Being on time and adherence to objectivity. So I just asked her if she believes that the goal of history should be to be objective, and she ultimately said yes. So I asked her if that's if her goal then, according to her own materials, is to promote a white supremacist culture. And I think according to her own materials, it is.
I'll never forget when I was a science administrator writing curriculum for Indianapolis, and I was told that I had to use that particular toolkit. So as a former guy who had to be confronted with that, thanks for taking the scalpel to it today in the committee. Representative Brandon Gill of Texas 26th, appreciate the work that you do. Also, he's in our documentary Sacred Honor for our 250th anniversary as a country. Thanks for your appearance in that as well.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
All right. Before we get back to some of the regular run of show here, I want to mention we do actually have footage now of the Iranians over, again, in Tehran. They are activating air defenses. It's unusual for us to actually get some of the footage of air defenses being active. You can hear some of the sounds of rounds being fired into the sky again as jets are overhead in, again, western Tehran, eastern Tehran. The current list of targets so far include Tabriz and west of Tabriz, Urmia, Baneh, that's right next to the Iraqi border. That's right on the border, actually. Khan Gavar, which is right in that initial mountain range going from Iraq into Iran. Parshin, and then a couple of other series of explosions in Tehran, which they originally tried to claim were gas leaks, and now have suggested, oh no, we're activating air defenses. There are fighter jets that are over Iran. And then a huge series of strikes on the Strait of Hormuz, all the way from right next to Kuwait and Iraq, all the way down, moving west of there to Bandar Abbas, right on the Strait of Hormuz, from the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, in which the Konarak port and Chabahar are getting hit pretty severely. So The Hormozgan officials have now denied any reports of U.S. strikes on Sirik or Bandar Abbas or anywhere else in the province. No, there's a pretty big wave of strikes that are ongoing. Again, we're kind of keeping an eye on this as things develop. I'm very interested in hearing what the United States is targeting. Apparently, there's a refinery in Mashahar, which is currently being struck by the United States. That would be a pretty big deal for the United States to begin hitting refineries and oil infrastructure in Iran. I don't see how the regime could survive if they actually don't have a way to refine and sell oil. That brings us to the end of our radio side of the coverage. We've got way more tonight on the live stream. YouTube.com/Daily Signal. Radio crew will go ahead and fade you guys out here. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Now, that brings us over to another piece of breaking news, which is that the Department of Justice is now investigating the state of New Jersey. This is a pretty wild one, folks, after just talking with Brandon Gill about the Save America Act as well. Governor Mickey Sherrill, Democrat, has now moved into full panic mode over this. So you can always tell when there is an official who is totally confident that everything is not going to burn down because they release a tweet that is longer than some books. This is what the kids call a doozy. She begins by saying, last week I learned that a serious software error in New Jersey's motor vehicle system led to the registration of roughly 6,600 people who indicated that they were not U.S. citizens between June of 2023 and June of 2024, almost 3 years prior to my taking office. So she wants to get very, very clear of this immediately. And this is a little interesting here. Why? Because you and I were told this wasn't happening. You and I were told this wasn't a thing. We said, hey, one of the dangerous things about illegals, about non-citizens, about those who are here on work visas being given driver's licenses is that they then could use those to register to vote in elections. And I was told, no, this software is maintained and nothing would possibly happen, because apparently the person reassuring me nothing ever happened is French. Anywho, she then continues by suggesting, our preliminary analysis shows fewer than 400 individuals who were newly registered for the first time because of the error voted. They were registered as Democrats, Republicans, and unaffiliated voters, and they were scattered across the state. Now that's interesting. So it went from being, it's just a software error. Gee, Andy, I can't possibly figure it out. Or maybe here, after you then have, of the 6,600 registered, 400 non-citizens ineligible to vote in the United States then go out and vote. That's a problem there, Bob. That's an issue. Now, then she says, I want to underscore how seriously I take this matter. I graduated from the Naval Academy. That's actually her argument. And then she complains that Donald Trump has just talked about election integrity. This one is just hilarious. This is hilarious because she says, the Trump administration tries to weaponize elections for political gain. I am ensuring we protect our elections. Let me be clear. Donald Trump has zero credibility on the issue of election integrity. But she also refuses to share voter rolls and records with the Department of Homeland Security. She refuses to share things with the United States Postal Service. So again, she said Donald Trump has zero credibility on the issue of election integrity. But also, please pay no attention to the very grumpy woman behind the curtain who has, been caught trying to mitigate or at least downplay the issues on, again, bizarre decisions regarding DMV auto registration. This is also why automatically registering people to vote is dumb. And automatically re-registering people to vote is dumb. Every election, you should have to go and declare, hello, I would like to vote in this election. That's what you should have to do every time. And every year you should have to do a different little funny accent as you go and register to vote. Every time. For national security, you betcha. And then Mickey Sherrill, that wasn't enough. So she gets out in front of the public and she starts doing the full-on gripe because that'll make things better.
In June of 2023, nearly 3 years before I became governor, a serious
Cover your butt, cover your butt, cover your butt.
software error in New Jersey's motor vehicle system led to the improper voter registration of what we believe to be roughly 6,600 people in our state. When New Jerseyans applied for a driver's license or identification at the MVC, they were asked if they wanted to register to vote. In the case of this error, some individuals indicated that they weren't citizens and weren't eligible to vote, but the software registered them anyway.
Oh, gee, that thing I'm told that doesn't happen. I'm told no problems at all. Again, who cares if China has access to all the back doors on things, because it could never happen. People would say, "Xiao Qianer, I promise that I'm not going to vote." You were told that. I was told that. Gee Willikers, shock, quelle surprise. I mean, amazing. Well, Harmeet Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General, who I'm convinced Todd Blanche continues to allow her to do what it is that she does because she's out for blood at all times of the day and night. I had the privilege of knowing her before she was the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. She wrote today in official letterhead there, and that'll matter here in a second. Dear Governor Sherrill, earlier today you represented that approximately 6,600 people who self-identified as non-citizens between June of 23 and 24 were nevertheless registered to vote in New Jersey. Indeed, approximately 400 of those individuals voted. And that's the thing. It's approximately. We don't know. Now that should be a problem again. Going over voter roll data is not some magical scheme to disenfranchise people. It is to check for errors like this. Let us assume for a second that this is a completely innocent error, which it absolutely might be. Checking the voter rolls and things would have solved this way back when. We could have been all the way through this and fixed in 2025. So then she says, she being Harmeet Dillon, Assistant Attorney General, says, quote, ensuring that U.S. citizens' votes are not illegally diluted by non-citizens' votes is of paramount importance. We therefore write to formally request additional information to assess New Jersey's compliance with various federal statutes as provided in our July 7th, 2026 letter to the Lieutenant Governor. As we stated in that letter, we stand ready to help New Jersey election officials comply with the Help America Vote Act of 2002 and the National Voter Registration Act of 93, as outlined in our memorandum entitled Freaking Follow the Law, our memorandum entitled Federal Law Requirements for State and Local Elected Officials. So then says, hey, provide this within 5 business days. And also, by the way, the registration dates, locations, addresses, nationalities, dates of birth, and the full names of the people who voted. You say your first pass is done around you found 400 people. So who are they? Because they violated federal law. They know they're not citizens to vote. So they committed what in the business we call a crime. Yeah. So excited. And then, of course, that we look forward to working with you on this matter. It's exciting. It's exciting stuff. Exciting times indeed. So again, moving forward just a little bit here as we continue, keeping an eye on the situation in Iran. We're keeping an eye on the developing situation over with regard to the Department of Justice. Taking a quick second here before we pivot to some of our other coverage here, just to make sure that we don't get anything wrong, because that's what we do for you here. Oh no, interesting stuff indeed regarding the Iranian situation here. There are calls on Iranian news sources, quote, urgent defend south of Tehran, Bostan Velayat. The sound will not stop. So now we have blasts heard in western Iran, intense anti-aircraft activity over Tehran, which is very, very interesting. Hold on, I've grabbed a clip that I'm going to have my team load here for you. So just throughout the Iranian capital, there is quite a bit of striking. Wednesday morning at 3:28 a.m., so that's about half an hour ago for us right now, I believe. They're not a half an hour off of us, are there, in that section of Iran? Checking on that for you. No, they are. They're a half an hour off of us. So about 7 minutes ago, a drone was seen in the sky of Tehran. It's unclear at this point whether this would be a U.S. military drone or this would be an Iranian drone attempting to do a little something or other. Keeping an eye on this one. Lots of fire happening as the United States begins what is easily the most intense and widespread series of strikes that I believe we have seen since March. And it is certainly intense. Pull over and see if we can get this particular clip up for y'all here. A lot of anti-aircraft fire over Tehran. Nothing like the sight of exploding rounds of various kinds of flak hitting absolutely nothing. And the pattern of fire is terrible. You're supposed to lead the craft, and you can always tell how fast the craft is that the anti-aircraft is shooting at because of the curve of the rounds, the tracers that fly off into the sky. Now, the United States has a little computer that does this, and when it's docked here in the United States in Virginia, it'll point at commercial airliners, and they have to treat it like a child. No, don't shoot the commercial airliner because the computer automatically tracks it. In Iran, I'm guessing this is just a guy named Rahim who is pointing, and the craft that he's trying to shoot at here, if I can explain this a little bit here. They have no idea what it is they're shooting at. There's no spread. There's no clear indication that they have any kind of a lock. They're simply firing into a general area where they believe that strikes have come in. My best guess from looking at this footage, and I've spent a considerable amount of time looking at footage when it comes to anti-aircraft measures, they are simply firing in a direction that a craft, either, again, a jet, maybe a bomber, perhaps even a very quickly flying drone, came in from that vector earlier in the evening. And so now they're just saying, hey, Rahim, go ahead and fire in that direction. Just like every couple of minutes, just. So exciting anti-aircraft crewmanship from the Tehranians. Very excited. And I do agree with the comment from Dan Shipman, not Danish. Dan Shipman says the guy's name is statistically likely to be Muhammad. And if he's firing at U.S. aircraft and, again, being spotted and vectored in here, by the end of the evening, he's statistically likely to be dead. So, anyway, we'll go ahead and another quick check here. According to I guess some underground reporter on the inside, right in central Tehran, as of Wednesday morning at 3:30, that's 8 minutes ago, defense is active in most parts of Tehran. So, a lot of very explosive stuff. Wingmen have been spotted over Iraq. That's in the Markazi province in Iran. The United States appears to have complete control over the Iranian skies and whatever this anti-aircraft is currently doing. As a reminder, those who are just now joining us, and I don't usually like to play a bunch of clips over later on in the show because those who listen to the podcast later will then go back and check things. But there was the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps guy earlier today who said, hey, we're now going to exclusively try to shoot Americans sleeping at all times and civilians in general. I really don't believe that the United States is going to be like, yeah, that's fine. Just fire at whoever you need. That's totally good. So I don't suspect that to be a thing. Again, just as a little quick aside here in the middle of this side of the Pentagon Pizza report, traffic at Extreme Pizza and Wise Guy Pizza, both minutes from the Pentagon, has surged from nearly nothing to very high traffic. Good times. Good times indeed. And now Iranian state television has pulled down their earlier reports that it was a gas explosion. You know.
Oh, there's a big surprise.
And now they're suggesting, yeah, it's air defenses active again. Exciting stuff indeed. I love the gas leak. Really taking it back to the Mission Impossible days. So moving forward here, before we end on this particular topic, if you would consider, in our description, right at the very tippy top, is our brand new Tony Kinnett Cast Clips YouTube channel, and that is where we're going to be uploading the interview with Brandon Gill, a couple of other exclusive pieces of content. So if you'd consider heading down to the description and going over there, we just launched the channel. We just put it up today. Consider throwing a little subscribe over there for us. That would help us out a massive ton. So, last on the update side on the international front, while we're keeping an eye on Iran, allow me to tell you about two particular reports that give me the warm fuzzies. Both are international matters. So Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the acting national security advisor, he has pointed out in a very detailed report from the State Department with great detail that individuals like Hassan Piker, the leftist streamer, that Code Pink, again funded by Neville Roy Singham. In fact, the head of Code Pink is the wife of Neville Roy Singham, the expatriate currently living in Shanghai, in China, trying to provide foreign interference here in the United States. The State Department essentially released an entire report outlining that Cuba has been trying to manipulate and destabilize the United States for decades upon decades. Now, again, you and I have known this for ages. And if you're a guy that likes radio, you've really known this for ages. In the good old era of number stations, if you're under the age of 45, number stations in Call of Duty Black Ops 1, when the voice operator's like, the numbers, Mason, what are the numbers? That's what that's a reference to. Radio waves, depending on the type of rave, the wave, not the rave, they can bounce off of the ionosphere into the earth. So you can use a very simple radio signal to bounce something. If you're in, Africa or Europe with a very simple radio transceiver that you run a wire up a tree, you can communicate with people here in the United States. And so it was a way for a long time, and still is in some ways, for countries to communicate with diplomats or spies in other parts of the globe, because you can't really effectively stop radio waves. There's a lot of jamming efforts, funnily enough, from Iran regarding Cyprus and the Lincolnshire poacher, which is another tale for another time. But in Cuba's case, HM-01 was a series of espionage attempts by the Cuban government that is still active today. There have been more espionage arrests in the United States for foreign intervention from Cuba trying to communicate by radio with sleeper cells here in the United States than anywhere else. One of the individuals who has been suspected of being part of one of those espionage rings is the guy who set up the whole Cuba Freedom Flotilla with friends and amigos. The totally humanitarian wink flotilla with Hassan Piker. And then immediately, as soon as Rubio pointed this out and is like, would sure be a real shame if anyone, investigated such a thing. You have Hassan Piker run out in front of the entire country and say, oh, no, I have First Amendment rights. Guys, you don't have a First Amendment right to vehemently support, like actively support, enemy regimes of the United States. That's not a thing. You don't actually have any right here in the United States to aid and abet foreign enemies, especially enemies designated by the Congress of the United States. That's not a thing. Just like someone can't stand next to you and go, I'm going to kill you in the name of God, and then say, I have freedom of religion. No, there are some common sense exceptions to those things. Now, that also brings us over to some of the other international news, of which I believe Secretary Rubio has already been critical, although the president seems to be waiting just a couple of minutes. The United Kingdom has a brand new prime minister. And I'm very sorry, producer Daniel. I am moving far quicker than some of our chyrons can be written here. The UK's got a brand new prime minister. Keir Starmer is out. And so they have elected yet another, I swear, a guy with so little testosterone that Pete Hegseth is starting to sweat. I mean, I don't know where they find these cucks in the Liberal Party. And again, the Liberals, over in the UK, the Labour Party, they have somehow reached out and they have found a guy just like Keir, former mayor, and they plopped him into position because Keir Starmer was about to face a very serious vote of no confidence. So he gets up in front of the UK. Again, you and I know what issues the United Kingdom is currently facing. The high rates of migrant crime, the economic stagnation issues. This guy gets up in front of the country and he blames two things: Margaret Thatcher and the right wing in the UK not being kind enough to the homeless or something. Bizarre. Here you go.
I know people at home are fed up with politics.
Of all the things. I know people at home are fed up with the rapes, the violence, the stabbings, the two-tier police system, the abandonment from the world stage, trying to get closer to China, being a wanker as far as NATO is concerned. What the Brits are really tired of, though, is the politics. You're tired of politics.
I hear you, and I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough, and we need to be better.
Okay. So is this going to be like we need to be better, as in Xavier Becerra in California saying, I'm like Gavin Newsom, but I'm way worse. I'm more of the same. I'm going to build twice as many railroads to nowhere. There's going to be wildlife bridges over every road in the state. Gas is going to be non-existent. Like, is that the move? Or is this like we're actually going to change direction? I bet you know the answer.
We will be. We will make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain.
We'll make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain. Great.
Bringing forward the biggest changes in the last 40 years.
Circuit breakers aren't meant to bring about a huge number of changes. They're meant to cut things off or turn things on.
A new political model and a new economic model. It's about putting the right values and the right standards at the heart of government. I will put the care of people at the heart of everything I do.
The care of British people, the care of those who are native to the British Isles, the care of those who have been citizens of the United Kingdom, who hold the values of traditionally the United Kingdom, of England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland.
Let's build a new national sense of unity.
A new national sense of unity. Uh-oh.
Of common purpose and positivity.
Oh, we're not being positive enough, guys. Quick, someone get the smile emojis. Text them out to, like, everybody.
Let us make this the moment when Britain starts to believe again. The moment we bring back hope.
This is like Samwise Gamgee's speech to Mr. Frodo. And it's something worth fighting for, Mr. Frodo. Only it's far more gay and retarded. The hope and unity. Something that I will always admire Donald Trump for. Seriously. And of all the things that you may like or hate about the guy, he would get into office. He'd get up for his speech and go, there's a lot of crap going on around the country right now. There's fires and people eating the cats and the dogs and the borders are open. And I think, what do you think, Marco? You think we can shut it all down? Vance? Can we lock up the fraudsters? He would address the problems and then say, here's where we're going to go. The Brits have decided they do have a policy. I know. Let's be fair. The policy is the homeless.
We will help people to live well.
Now, how are you going to describe the homeless here? Go ahead and go ahead and write your guesses in the comments. What's he going to say? Is he going to say A, homeless, B, unhoused, or C, something that is perhaps more homosexual than all of Pride Month combined? You have your answer?
Building a more preventative state, investing in people's success rather than paying for failure. And that work starts now. I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country.
To end rough sleeping in our country. Rough sleeping. To end rough sleeping. Yes. Not unhoused, rough sleeping. Yes. I'm not a drug addict. I'm just, a nervous self-stabbing. Now, I don't really commit murder. I just do a little aggressive hand hugging. You know what I'm saying? Just, a little rough sleeping there, kiddo. Excellent. And again, you'll notice that he says we're going to be preventative. So again, every time there is a kind of crime, for example, high crime in New York City, anytime there is a massive amount of fraud, the answer always comes invariably from the left that what we need to do is be more preventative. We need more. And by the way, this is the reason I had a significant argument with the Israeli Foreign Ministry when I was in Jerusalem this last year. And why the knockdown drag out? I hate the idea. I despise it. It's stupid. It is wrong. That, well, if you have someone who's bad, you just got to educate him a little more. Because as any teacher will tell you, there are children who, if they do, they're not going to learn. They will choose. They will look you in the face and say, I do not bleeping care. And then the answer from the left is, we just got to make education fun. Barack Obama was famous for this. George W. Bush, this was his biggest flaw. He said, every heart yearns for freedom. And Barack Obama had this idea that if we just gave jobs to people in Syria and in Lebanon and Iraq and Afghanistan, then they would turn into better men. And it turns out that's crap. People who believe differently than you, like a cultural depth level, more education ain't going to do it. Preventative care, the idea that if we just have a parents' night out for Muhammad, that he's not gonna, stab the kid on the way home because, after all, he's looking forward to a hot date with a state-funded babysitter. Yeah, that ain't doing it, Chief. That's not. You cannot govern with just the stick, and you cannot govern with just the carrot. The stick is for consequences, and the carrot should not be shoved in the face of the horse. It's a common sense thing that most of you understand because you've raised children, you've raised families. Thomas Sorbach, thank you very kindly for gifting 20 Daily Signal memberships to the channel. By the way, all that channel membership does, other than giving you some early access to some things, we made some emojis and such. And you can access those emojis. So don't feel like you're necessarily missing out or anything. We appreciate the donation. Obviously, that helps us. It's very, very kind of you. So I'm excited to see what the Brits do. Now, of course, Trump immediately came out and said he had a great first conversation with the guy. Trump always says these kinds of things. Before we end on international stuff, I do want to mention, and we mentioned this on the show, I think yesterday actually, that the socialist president of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega, has now announced no more elections ever. Because again, socialist countries, there's nothing to worry about. I mean, it's just like the Scandinavians. Bernie Sanders celebrated the Nicaraguan regime. Well, here's how it's doing.
No volverán a haber elecciones. Volverán a haber elecciones.
Now, what you can see, or what you can't see just out of camera, is all of the Nicaraguan military officials pointing guns at the crowd and saying, cheer. Cheer. Make sure you get out there and get loud, Chin chin. Incredible. And pa dentro. I love it. I love it so much. It's such an exciting time. Of course, again, this is a terrible situation for the people of Nicaragua. This is exactly how socialist governments go. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, and I quote, "The Trump administration and the international community will not stand by as the Murillo Ortega dictatorship deepens repression at home and manufactures instability that threatens U.S. national security. Ortega's pledge to abolish elections in Nicaragua proves his cowardice and fear of the Nicaraguan people's will." Now, I would just like to say very, very clearly, and I do want to make this, abundantly clear here. I am so excited to see private military companies get little checks from the State Department to go destabilize that government. I'm here for it. I say, hey, are you a representative of Chiquita Banana? Let's do it. Come on. Get the CIA back to its roots, to its real roots. Let's topple a country. Come on. It would be great. And you know what? Make Nicaragua a territory, not a voting territory. And make it a military government. Why not? Why? Because we can. Because the United States is the best country on the face of this earth. I love it. From that Michigan guy, very kind $20 super chat, said, "First time hearing you and subscribed. Excellent. I look forward to more." I look forward to disappointing you with the shenanigans of the daily news cycle until you get absolutely sick of it and toss your computer into a garbage can. And then your mental health will improve. Because, not sucking down all of this nonsense and being told everything is going to be wonderful, as is the trend for a lot of the left-wing governments anyway, and not too far gone from, some of the right-wing party groups is kind of a common thing. I do have one more thing that I will need my team to share. Zoran Mamdani, speaking of socialists, has just released a statement. So after Zoran Mamdani floated to his crew, we're going to try to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, when he comes in September to the United Nations. Then Zoran Mamdani came out and said, well, we're looking at the laws. And it's, we're just going to look at the laws. Then Lulu from the New York Times said, you don't have the right to do that. And he said, well, we're going to look at the laws. Then a reporter pushed back and said, hey, you don't really have the right to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. And also, you've never once criticized Ayatollah al-Khamenei or the Iranian regime, for murdering 50,000 people. And then Mamdani's like, well, I mean, come on, was essentially his response. And it's disgusting. Well, Mamdani has now released a brand new video address this evening. And I believe that we are, I'm pretty sure that we're the ones who are breaking this one. So I might be able to claim that, 25 minutes ago. So probably not. But anyway, here is Zoran Mamdani, who is out now to announce, quote, Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal. This man focuses on New York less than any mayor of New York I have ever seen.
Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal.
Oh, so brave. Quick. Oh, so brave. He's the war criminal. My pearls. Quick, my pearls.
The architect of a horrific genocide against the Palestinian people. He is responsible for the killing of more than 73,000 people.
Sources do
For
trust
the
me.
maiming of tens of thousands of children, as those who survive undergo amputation without anesthesia.
And that would be because when the United Nations tried to ferret in those medical supplies, Hamas stole them. And now it is even the United Nations who has admitted, yeah, the United States was right. They're stealing the semis, and all these videos opened up, like showing Hamas stealing the medical supplies. That doesn't sound like Benny Netanyahu. He sent the trucks in. Again, I neither know nor care about your opinion on Netanyahu or the Israeli government, but to blame everything on him.
For the targeting of neonatal hospitals and maternity care centers, denying newborns even the chance to live.
Iran was not around. Again, all the rockets thrown at Israeli hospitals were not available for comment.
For the countless people he starved as he blocked food and humanitarian aid from reaching them.
Literally just a blatant lie.
For the gunning down of hundreds of aid workers and journalists. And just last month, the UN confirmed that Palestinian children continue to be deliberately targeted and killed by Israeli armed forces, more than 8 months after the so-called ceasefire. The list goes on and on, all as we, as Americans, pay for the bombs that do the killing. There is a reason the International Criminal Court issued a warrant for his arrest.
Well, I mean, the guy who is trying to prosecute Benjamin Netanyahu is currently under investigation in Europe. Why? For sexual assault and possibly human trafficking. Because, of course.
As human beings, we have spent generations building a shared understanding that there are crimes so grave, they offend all of humanity.
No, some cultures, one of which you're currently trying to tear down, thinks that there should be a list of crimes that we all deem to be crimes against humanity. I hear your biggest supporter repping Mao, so I don't think that you really have too many legs to stand on here.
Anyone, with their eyes, with their heart, with their conscience, should recognize the devastation he has wrought and understand that he belongs before a court of law.
This is the mayor of New York City, who Tucker once praised for focusing on New York instead of Israel. I'm not joking. This was Tucker's big argument for Zoran Mamdani, was that he focused on the people of New York instead of Israel.
As I've said, I agree with the ICC that Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested and tried for his crimes, as I do for anyone else charged by the ICC. My administration has reviewed every avenue available under applicable law to determine whether New York City could execute the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant if Benjamin Netanyahu came here. It is clear that we do not have the independent legal authority to enforce this warrant. The federal government, however, does, and I call on them to join the ICC and execute this warrant.
Oh, so he's chickening out. Ah, good.
And I want to be equally clear. Benjamin Netanyahu is not welcome in New York City.
Oh, stunning
nor is
and
any
brave.
other war criminal at large.
You go, girl. Again, other than the Iranians, no word about them. Again, your office tried to meet with the Iranian consulate and was stopped by the State Department.
While we cannot end the genocide on our own, we can decide whether our silence will become another weapon.
I'm done. I'm sorry. I'm not listening to the last 20 seconds of that. It is just, it's far too gay. Pride Month is over. Just, okay. It's real special. That's real wonderful, sweetie. That's real great. Thanks for sharing. Beautiful time. I love it when people admit that it is, in fact, rather rough and you can't do anything about it. And so you're going to claim a victory, like a moral victory at a beat poetry competition. Kind of closing out our coverage of the night, of course, there was currently a noticeable up-tempo, as one open source kind of intelligence guy had described it. The United States is still engaged in a series of strikes across Iran. Of course, the president of the United States met today with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun. And if I'm not pronouncing that name correctly, I'm sorry, I don't care. If the Lebanese and the United States work together alongside Israel to get rid of Hezbollah, that will be a pretty huge deal, given that, again, Hezbollah killed a lot of people in what used to be a Christian country a long time ago. So quite a lot going on as we're kind of keeping track on a couple of things. We will see you guys tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, here on the Tony Kinnett Cast. Again, if you have a second, subscribe to our new YouTube channel. That'd help us out a massive ton. The link to that's in the description. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Before I say take care, I also meant to talk this evening about the new court that the Trump administration is setting up for immigration matters. I will try my best to make sure that is on the docket for tomorrow. Sorry, there's sometimes just too much news, but we'll get to it as best we can. Take care.